Seated. God is good.
All the time.
And all the time.
God is good.
Amen. It is good to be with you today. Thanks for being here. Thanks to our folks on Facebook. Those fighting illnesses or traveling, we look forward to seeing you again. And of course, if you're just checking us out, we'd love for you to come visit us. Diagnostics. You might think, what a strange title for a sermon. But the concept has so much practical application for this series through Ecclesiastes that we're going through. Think about it for just a moment. If you've ever had a leaky roof, the roofer, he can't fix it until he gets up and diagnoses the problem. Jonathan, you did some roofing for a while. I know you guys are doing new roofs, but I'm sure there were some repairs. You can see water coming through, but you don't know where it comes from. Same thing with your car, right? The mechanic has to diagnose the problem, right? Your service engine light comes on. He doesn't know what it is. He's got to get underneath there, get the code reader out, listen to it, look, check belts, check pulleys, check all that, right? You've got to diagnose it. It's an interesting word, diagnostic. It comes from the Greek dia, to go through, and then gnostic is knowledge. So it's only through knowledge of observing these things that we can fix them. And everyone in this room has at one point in their time been sick or had to go to the doctor, right? The doctor's going to diagnose you before he can give you a prognosis, before he can tell you what's wrong. Last year I was driving home. I remember this. I started having this experience, and I still have it to this day, where I see my pulse in my left eye. It's a strange sensation. I don't know if you've ever experienced that before, but I was seeing my pulse in my left eye. And I'm driving home, I'm pulling the pump, and all of a sudden my vision goes out in my left eye. It's just like white fog. I'm blind. And I call Tammy, and I'm so worried. And I'm like, I can't see. So she calls and gets me an emergency visit with an eye doctor here in town that very afternoon. I go in, he's going to diagnose the problem. So he takes pictures of my eyes, they dilate my eyes. What a terrible experience that is, right? You're in a dark room, bright light, they're taking pictures. And he looks at my eye and he says, you know, the good news is structurally I don't see anything wrong with your eye. You know, there's no tumors, tears, whatever you want to call it. He said, but on a scale of 1 to 10, there's like a bone in the back of your eye that your optical nerve and your blood flows through. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the ideal size, yours is a 4. And I have a high hematocrit, I have a high red blood cell count. So my blood is bottlenecking as it goes through my eye. So in the big picture, I guess I'll be okay, I don't know. But I needed a diagnostic exam, right? Without proper knowledge, you can't fix any problem. Now here's the problem with Ecclesiastes. There's a lot of grim diagnosis going on. It seems bleak, it seems nihilistic, it seems absurd. But we have to be able to fight the temptation to just turn the page and get to the better stuff. Because without a proper diagnosis, we can't fix it. We got to have useful knowledge, even when we don't want to hear it, even when it makes us uncomfortable. And Solomon makes us uncomfortable. You know, it's rare to be able to have a single paragraph that could diagnose and solve the problem. That's where poetry comes in. Poetry has a way of doing that. There's a poet, he's long gone now, Alden Nolan. Talis, plug your ears for a moment. He's Canadian. Don't hold it against him, because he's got a really cool background. He quit school when he was 11 years old. Now this is last century, right? He was born during the Depression. 11 years old, he quits school and goes to work at the sawmill up in Canada. And works there until he's about 20. But the whole time, so he doesn't have a school education. He goes to the public library. You'll like that, man. He's a huge reader. And he reads and he reads and he reads. And he gets a job in the newspaper. and becomes a journalist and then becomes a poet and an author. But I want to share one of his favorite verses with you of poetry. I think you'll like it. Even if he's a Canadian, Talis, I think you'll like this. The day a child realizes that all adults are imperfect, he becomes an adolescent. The day he forgives them, he becomes an adult. And the day he forgives himself, he becomes wise. That's so beautiful. I'm going to read it one more time. The day a child realizes that all adults are imperfect, he becomes an adolescent. And the day he forgives them, he becomes an adult. And the day he forgives himself, he becomes wise. Are you familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect? Anybody ever hear that term before? You have. Okay. Michael knows that when people have low competency and low understanding of a task or a system, they're overly confident. They think they can do the work. Be like, I drive my car and I watch these guys like in the space shuttle, and I think, I could do that. I could be an astronaut, right? You know? No. But the other side of the coin for the Dunning-Kruger effect is the people with the capacity, the people with the knowing, the people with the expertise, they think it's so simple that they believe everybody else has the same understanding of the topic as themselves. So the people without the ability are overconfident and they think they can do it. The people who can do it assume that everyone else can understand the scenario just as well as they can. Solomon, I think, is someone who has the world experience, has the capability of doing the tasks that he wants to do with wisdom, but he doesn't have the problem of thinking everybody else understands it. He goes to great lengths to, in fact, probably lengths that stretch our comfort zone to get us to understand, to diagnose, to look at the world as it really is. And that matters. The experience that Solomon brings to the table and the concepts that he wants us to contemplate change our attitudes and our behaviors. So, chapter 1, verse 12, Solomon again refers to himself as the preacher. Some translations will say teacher, whatever. It's that Koleth word for collector, assembler, gatherer. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem. That's almost all you need to know to get the idea that when he speaks, we should listen. To be a king, to be a monarch, to be over God's holy city, to be able to be placed into that position with that status, gives him a voice. And you may not say, well, I respect his authority. You have to respect the position and the perspective that he brings to the table that's very unique, right? So here I am. I'm the preacher. I'm collecting all this information. I have been king over all of Jerusalem. So I'm leading God's people. And verse 13 says, I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. Now remember, when Solomon uses this phrase, under heaven, he's talking about the everyday work world, family world, commerce world, all that goes on here. And it's in a sense of how when we look at it without seeing it through the lens of God, how bleak it is. That's what he's trying to do here. And you have to ask yourself, all right, when you're king of Israel and you're as wealthy, remember last week we talked about how his net worth was $2 trillion and you're the wisest person in the world, why would you do anything? Why would you make the effort to go through all of this? So I applied, right, to search out by wisdom all that's done. It is an unhappy, what a terrible conclusion right out of the gate. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. Remember, work is not a curse. Adam was put in the garden to tend the garden. Work doesn't become a curse until after the fall, right? Man has been given this unhappy business to be busy with, right? I have seen, verse 14, everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity. That's that word for breath or vapor or mist. It's useless, right? And the chasing, the striving after the wind. You can't hold the wind. You can't grab the wind. You can't even see the wind. It is absurd. All that we do under the sun, he is saying, is absurd. And so Solomon's going to say, let me give you some insight into my methods, how I'm going to pursue this, and what my mission is. He's telling us, here's my mission. Here's what I want to do. Even though, again, the diagnostic information is uncomfortable. We don't want to hear it. But if you ignore it, right, the doctor can't fix the symptoms that you have. The mechanic can't tune the car up. The roofer can't fix the leak. You got to have the uncomfortable information. To which I ask the question, and I struggle with this because I don't think I did a good job with it. And I don't know a rule book or a manual that helps you know when the right time is. But at what point do we stop shielding our children from the fact that life isn't fair? Life is going to be hard at times. In fact, the majority of the time, life can be difficult, trying. It can be a struggle. But I don't know why. We do our very best to shield our children from this harsh truth. And I don't know the right answer to it. But Solomon, he's pulling out all the stops. He's not sandbagging. He's not holding back any punches here. It's an unhappy business that God has left us with. Everything is futile. Everything is pointless. And it's like, you've been reading some Sartre lately? What's going on here? You know? Some Cabeas? What's going on? This is terrible stuff. What are you doing to me? Again, without the diagnostic, you can't fix it. So that metaphor, chasing after the wind, you just can't hold it. It's always going to be elusive. You ever read any Cormac McCarthy books? Betty, I know you're a big reader. I know you and I love Stephen King. Did you ever see the movie No Country for Old Men? It's an older movie. Yeah, okay. The guy that wrote that, Cormac McCarthy, he's actually from this area. He's from Knoxville. His book, The Road, that they made into a movie, it's like a post-apocalyptic. The movie was okay, but the book. But everything that this guy writes, I'm going to tell you, it's dark, it's bleak, it seems depressing, but it is such an accurate assessment of the world that we find ourselves in. And on top of this, not only does Solomon say everything is futile, I hate to do it to you, but look at verse 15 with me. What is crooked cannot be made straight. What is lacking cannot be counted. It's almost like not only is the world bad, you can't even change it if you want to. It's like, where's the encouragement? Why are you doing this to me, Solomon? Again, it's tempting to just turn the page and try to ignore what Solomon has to say. But we've got to diagnose the situation. So as I read this, that question comes to my mind, at what point do we stop shielding our children from the reality that life can be harsh? But the next question comes to my mind is, why are so many of the pursuits that we pour our hearts into so disappointing when we finally get there? You know, there's an old saying, I don't know who came up with it, but when you're climbing the ladder, right, that metaphor for the ladder of success, make sure the ladder's against the right wall. Talis, I hope you don't get PTSD thinking about falling off your ladder, but when you're climbing the ladder, make sure it's up against the right wall. There is an elusive, listen to me, an elusive nature to satisfaction. Jonathan, I hope that you hold on to the same sentiment you had when you first started out at Cardinal. You posted on Facebook, I want to retire from this place. I love working here so much. I hope you never lose that enthusiasm or zealousness for it. Let me tell you, 5 years from now, it's going to be hard to still have those same feelings, right? You might get multiple promotions. And once you hit one, all of a sudden, 5 years ago, if I could have been in that position, I would love it. And then once you get there, it's like, it didn't bring me the satisfaction I wanted. Why is that? It's so true in life. It's plagued us since the beginning of time. Churchill said something like, success is never final and failure is never fatal. What a fine tension that we walk through in this life. The elusive nature of complete satisfaction, the seemingly absurdity of life. It reminds me of the movie Wizard of Oz. I'm a terrible parent because Clay, who's 26, 27 years old, repeatedly tells me, like every 6 weeks, Dad, you never watched Wizard of Oz with me. I've never seen that movie yet. How did I skip that one? I don't know. But you remember, when they finally get to Oz and they want to meet the wizard, what happens? There's some little guy behind the curtain pulling the levers. Right? I hope I'm not spoiling the movie. Have you guys seen the movie? No? Well, there's a little short guy who's the wizard pulling all the levers behind the curtain. It's terrible to see how everything played out. Gosh, that's a plot. But listen, that's like the first movie in color, so I'm sorry. Look at verse 18, right? We can't make it straight. Verse 16, I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge, and I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this is also striving after the wind. It's almost like a little bit of PTSD in there for him. Man, I'm wounded. I've tried all this, and it just is futile. But look at verse 18. For in much wisdom is much vexation, right? You're tense, you're frustrated, you're angry, right? And he who increases in knowledge increases in sorrow. At which point you stop reading the text and you say, then why would I even want to read this, Solomon? So far, everything you have told me is that everything under the sun is futile, absurd, pointless, meaningless. And not only that, you're giving me information, and you're telling me the more information I have, the more sorrow comes upon me. Think about, speaking of PTSD, think about the PTSD that our soldiers carry with them. Think about jaded and cynical prosecutors, prison wardens, people who deal with that, right? They see a side of humanity that we, well, Talis, you were a police officer. I bet there were times you felt a little jaded.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You think about this, and why would Solomon highlight all of this absurdity and pointlessness and pain? Now, Solomon, king of Israel, wise, insightful, all of this that he has to say is extremely valuable because of this. In case you don't already know it, we live in a fallen world. These are the consequences of living in a fallen world. These are right? With much knowledge increases much sorrow. When does mankind experience the knowledge of good and evil for the first time? When he eats the forbidden fruit. God says, don't eat from this tree. Adam eats from it, and look at what has happened. Sickness enters in. Entropy enters into the universe, right? The second law of thermodynamics kicks in. Disease, evil, all of this happens, and we live, ever since we've been east of Eden, in a fallen world, and ignoring the condition of the world and pretending that it's not the way it is foolishness. That's why Solomon is going to such great lengths to point out the absurdity of just this temporal plane that we are in. Now, I want to wrap up with this because I believe that there are a lot of people that are interested in faith or Christianity, but they believe the Bible is just another mythological book. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the Bhagavad Gita, anything like that, right? Books that have ideas about supernatural spirituality, but definitely seem to be mythological. I believe that this painful diagnostic process that Solomon is dragging us through like crawling through broken glass is valuable because he's not painting this world as a fairy tale land of enchantment. If you were going to fabricate a myth that you wanted to get people to buy into, you would do your best to edit out and shield your audience from harsh. So I'm going around about a long way because that's what preachers do. They can never say anything simple or straightforward in one sentence. To me, this gives so much authenticity and so much credibility to the scripture, because if you were fabricating a myth, you would never put anything like this to please people's imaginations or to get them to not turn the page. I hope you'll stick with me as we keep going through Ecclesiastes, and I promise it's going to get a lot better before we're done. All right, let's stand and let's sing.